The file system of the Cisco iOS. I'll never forget when I first took apart a Cisco router. I was expecting something magical to be going on inside of there that was accomplishing all of this routing wizardry, and I was pretty disappointed when I took off the lid, and what I saw was an old dusty motherboard, some memory chips, an old processor, and my very first job was building computers on an assembly line, so I've seen plenty of that, and that's where I realized, it's not the hardware that makes this device special. It's the software that does it. Frankly, the hardware can be fairly pathetic, and the device does just fine. Its job is to take a packet from one cable and move it to another. Good job, Cisco device, right? So it doesn't need like World of Warcraft video rendering or anything like that. It just needs the basic components of a computer, and that's what you see inside of there. You see the RAM, NVRAM, and flash. So think of a computer. When you first turn on your computer at home, what you witness is it going through a power-on self-test, a post. And that's all handled by what's known as ROM, read-only memory. There's somebody who manufactured a chip that went on that motherboard that told the computer, this is what you need to check on boot. This is what options you'll give the person in the BIOS and all that kind of stuff. And a Cisco device has that same capability. It has a read-only memory that does the post. These are just the ones that you can actually work with. So what happens on your computer after it goes through post? It boots, right? It goes to the operating system, whether it be OS X on the Apple world or Windows or Linux. So what the post does, or the ROM process goes to, not the ROM process, the post process goes, it says, okay, this is going to be the hard drive of the device that you're booting off of. And in the Cisco world, that's flash. See, we look at solid state drives as like, man, those are the latest and greatest, but Cisco has had solid state drives for years in flash chips. It's the same chips that have powered your digital cameras and things like that, because the operating system of Cisco can fit inside of a 16 megabyte flash chip or a 128 megabyte flash chip. It's grown over the years as they've added more features, but the flash is the hard drive of the device. Matter of fact, I'm going to bust out my Cisco router over here. Bam. Now I'm sitting on the console port, so got my little config message. I'm going to log in, get to privilege mode, and type in show flash, right? And what it's doing is it's showing me what's on the hard drive of the device. And I can see right there is my iOS software, C2600 Advanced Enterprise version 12.4 release 13B. Right? And you just kind of get used to interpreting these different version numbers, but it's pretty straightforward when you see right there. Now you notice I've got a little backup config on there, CBT router -config. At some point in my life, and I don't know when I did that, I copied some files to that. Matter of fact, I can treat it just like a hard drive. I can say delete flash : backup config, and hitting the tab key finishes that for me. It says, are you sure? Yes, and bam, it's gone. I'll hit the up arrow, do a show flash, and notice it's it's like, I thought you do. No, it is. It's just letting you know it's deleted. The way some of the old flash chips works is it doesn't actually remove, like it deletes the pointer to it, right? And this is actually what happens on your hard drive. You just never know it because the operating system hides it. It deletes the pointer to the file, but the file's still there. It's just kind of hidden. It's quote unquote deleted. You can use a command called squeeze on some of the old routers. Squeeze the flash. It takes like 10 minutes to do, so I'm not going to do it, where it literally finds all the empty sectors and gives them all back to you. So that's kind of the idea on flash. So watch this. I'm going to type in, no, I'm not. Let's come back here. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I want to show you some of these other things first. RAM, right? The beauty of RAM is its speed. That's why every computer has gigs and gigs of RAM nowadays, is because when the operating system boots, it moves from this relatively slow storage medium, flash in this case, into a high speed medium. That's the RAM. That's what actually happens. In one of the previous nuggets in the series, I did a kind of hyper view of the boot process of a Cisco device. I kind of consolidated in about 20 seconds by hitting the fast forward button. And one of the things that you saw during the boot process is it sat there shooting these pound symbols across the screen. That usually takes about 3 to 5 minutes when the device is booting. What it's actually doing is decompressing that entire operating system. This guy right here, this bin, this binary file, that's what the bin is there, is a compressed version of the iOS. And so during the boot process, these pound symbols, is it extracting and copying the whole operating system into RAM, because that's what makes it run fast. That's the beauty of RAM. Some of you know the drawback of RAM, right? What is it? It's volatile. If the power goes out, everything in RAM is gone. That's everybody's favorite story to tell, is the time that they were on their computer and the power went out and all my hours of work got lost and alien respawn, goodbye, and I had to retype all of that stuff, right? So that RAM is the same way on a Cisco device. Volatile, very fast. So what is this NVRAM? Come on, give me a guess. $100 question. What is NV? Non-volatile RAM. So what that is a specific set of flash, and on some routers they actually have it as a separate chip. On some devices they partition a little piece of the flash that stores the operating system for NVRAM, and that saves your configuration. Now, the big thing I want to show you in this nugget is, how do you do that? I mean, how do you move data? Like, for instance, your configuration is in RAM. How do you save it into NVRAM? How do you back things up inside of the flash? Well, follow along with me, and I want to finish what I was going to do just a moment ago. When you do your configuration, so when I go in here and type in hostname Jeremy, right? And I change the router's host name to Jeremy. That's stored in what's known as running config. It's actually stored in RAM. So if the router were to lose power at this point, then it would lose all of my configuration that went in there. Now, some people might say, well, that's kind of lame. I mean, why don't they, from the minute you type in Jeremy, just put it in the, non-volatile flavor so it's saved immediately when you do this? Well, that will actually save your bacon many times, because there's a lot of times where you'll be doing a configuration remotely, right? And you type in the wrong command and you lose access to that device. Talk to anybody that's been in the Cisco world for any amount of time, and they will have a story to tell when they were configuring the router in Puerto Rico at 1 in the morning and they typed a command and I lost access to the device, and now they're down until somebody gets there on site and does what? Reboots it. Right? By pulling the power out and putting it back in, whatever command I typed in that took the router down is now reverted, and it goes back to basics. And actually, one command you will want to know, and this is not exam, this is real life, save your life command. Reload in 5. Sure, we'll save the configuration. Check. And I know many of you have put those puzzle pieces together. What happens when you type that in? If there was a speaker on the router, it'd be like, bum, bum, bum. But, Mission Impossible song would be going. You got a 5-minute countdown before it starts reloading. And that's awesome, because you then will start doing those changes that might be something that could cut your access to the router if you type the wrong thing. But don't worry, in 5 minutes, the device will reboot itself and you'll go back to the command before that. If it were to save as you were typing, that would be a major problem, because you would type the command that disabled it and then it'd reboot and you'd still be stuck. It's still disabled. Now you need a Cisco expert to go out to the device with a console cable, which just doesn't happen in so many cases. So I can just tell you story after story where this command has saved me. And obviously you would do that during a scheduled outage window. So you don't want to do that during the middle of the day. And you're like, oh man. And I can't tell you the number of times where I finish the config, because I'll do like a reload in 30, right? Because I'm doing a bigger config. And I just forget to do it and I cause an outage anyway. So anyway, reload, cancel is how you cut the bomb wires on that command. So that being said, watch this. So my host name is Jeremy, right? So I'm going to type in the command show running config, which shows all of the configuration that's on this device from RAM. Look at the first page of this config. You see it right there, host name Jeremy. Let me type in show startup config, and please do this on your router with me. Oh, I saved the configuration when I was showing you the reload in command, because right up here it said, do you want to save? And I saved. So I totally undid my own demo. So let's do this. I'm going to do global config, host name, Sally. So now I'll go back and do the show. Well, let's do show startup first, right? The startup config is still hostname Jeremy. If I were to do the show running config, now I'm going to see the hostname Sally in real time. Those two commands are essential to you. Show run, show start is the shortest way that you can start those. Show run, show start. You'll use those constantly. That is your number one troubleshooting command. What is this command? I mean, really, it is the command to show every single command that's typed into the router. So when I type in show run or show running config, These are literally the commands that you type in to configure different things on the router. Well, I went in at some point in messing with this router, and I gave it an IP address on this. Now watch this. I'm going to go in here, and I'll do a copy. I'll hit Q there. Go into global config mode. Watch this. Paste. Did you get that? What? I'll do it again. Paste. Paste, paste, paste. That's okay. You can retype those same commands again and again and again and again. It's just taking the commands. You want to know what's the quickest and easiest way to store a backup of your configuration? Do a show running config. Hold down the space key. Get through all of the stuff, right? Watch this. Hang on. This is your backup strategy for Sally. I'm coming down here to the bottom, and I open an ultra sophisticated program such as this and paste it in there. I now have a backup of all my configuration on that device. Seriously, I can default this device, erase its configuration back to scratch, go into global configuration mode. That's the key. Start from global config. I could highlight this entire thing, right, all the way to the bottom. Control C. Watch this. I'm going to come back here, config T, come in there and paste. You can right click and putty, and it literally pastes it in, and that would configure the router from scratch. So really, when you're saving your config, and the boot process, by the way, is pretty fun when you know that fact. What it does is it boots the iOS, right? The operating system, and then takes what's in NVRAM and literally types in every one of those commands to configure the router. So every time you reboot your device, your router types in all the commands and reconfigures itself. It's kind of like the old batch files. For those of you that are as old as I am and remember config.sys, autoexec.bat. I'm going down memory lane now. For you DOS people, that's how we used to boot our old DOS computers. It was just a script that would run that would configure your sound cards and everything. And I know I'm talking to a generation that's like, what are you talking about? Ignore the whole config.sys and autoexec.bat. Just think of it as typing in every single one of those commands. So I come to the culmination here of all of this wonderful knowledge, and I go, well, how do you do this? How do you save and restore your configuration? Well, watch this. Copy, running config, startup config. Enter, enter, done. That is how you save your configuration, and boy, would I recommend getting used to typing that command. Copy running config, startup config. Copy, come on, say it with me. Sing a song. Copy running config to startup config. Do something that gets that thing stuck in your memory. I have met people that they've typed that so many times that I'll be like, okay, why don't you change the host name, Bob, Control Z. They immediately go back. Copy, run, start. Right? That's the shortest way that you could type it. Copy, run, start. Copy, run. So get that stuck in your head, because if you forget to do that, remember, these routers can have run times of years. If you forget to do that and then the device reboots, you could be up a creek because you've lost configurations from the last year that you just forgot to save. Ultimate way of saving your config, and when I'm saying ultimate, the quickest way of saving it is actually the old write memory command, or a lot of times you can just type in WR, depending on your version, MEM. That automatically does the same thing. That's the old version. Before Cisco had the copy run start command, they had write memory. And so that was the old way of doing it. And a lot of routers will even support just WR. And that will save your configuration. So on an exam, that's the command you want to remember. In the real world, you'll find yourself always typing WR. I've thought of probably 50 more things I want to tell you, but let's wrap this nugget up. I want to show you, how do you factory reset a Cisco device? So you get it from eBay. You've got some old config. Matter of fact, this is the perfect one, because I looked at my configuration there and I was like, ooh, look at that. That's actually from one of my voice over IP classes. I just forgot to delete it out. So I'm like, you know what? Sally, you got to go. Or Bob, you got to go. How do I factory default it? I can type in, there's a few ways. The easiest one is write erase. That's the old way of doing it. And you can see right there, it says erasing the NVRAM file system will remove all your configuration files. Now, you'll notice it'll come back. I pressed enter. By the way, when you see this confirm, just pressing enter, whatever's in the brackets will be the default by pressing the enter key. So you can just hit enter there. You can type in Y, enter there, whatever makes you feel good. And it's erased it. So I've erased it, right? But notice it's still called Bob, right? How did that happen? What happened there? Well, remember, what did I erase? The NVRAM. Did I erase the RAM? No. So all of those commands are still existing. Nothing changes when I type in this write erase, other than the fact that if I now do what? What do I have to do to wipe this thing clean? Reboot it. You got it. Because the RAM is volatile. So if I reset the device, it'll do it. Now watch this. I'm going to type in reload. That's how you reboot the device. It says, do you want to proceed? Now, some routers and some iOS versions will ask you if you want to save your config before you reboot. If you do, if you intend to default the device, if you save your config, then you've undone what you started, right? Because you're going to copy the RAM back to the NVRAM and reboot, and you won't factory default the device. But for now, as for me, when I hit the enter key right there, it's going to boot up. It's not going to have any configuration in NVRAM, and it will take me back to factory defaults. Now, I know some of you who are very meticulous saw on my previous slide, I had that little server over there with TFTP and HTTP. You're like, what's that? That's my teaser. I got to bring you back for the next nugget where I'm going to take this to a whole nother level. And I know I feel like this is a little early in the series, but not really. This is totally a different way than I approached it last time I recorded this, but it's going to be so good. So you've seen what's local to the device, right? Flash, NVRAM, ROM, RAM. Now I'm going to get into what's not local, some of the other servers in the upcoming nugget. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. Oh, surprise ending. It's like one of those movies where they roll the credit and all of a sudden the guy comes back on. He's like, it's not over. So I just wanted to, I was watching the router reboot and I was like, I think I did it on the hyper version before. I just want to show you in real time what this looks like. This whole process right here is the Cisco device copying its iOS out of Flash into RAM and decompressing it all at the same time. That's how long it really takes to watch this device boot, which if you've caused a network outage, you're like, go, go, go. Okay, I'll catch up with you in the next nugget.